economy that supports local businesses. We're talking local content. And think tank IMANI Africa, together with its partners, today launched a report on the performance of the local content law that we have in the country and whether or not this has been able to support domestic businesses as expected. And the issues of Ghana's local content seems not to be going through effective implementation, a situation that has called for a broader stakeholder discussion on how the country can improve its local content position in order to derive the maximum benefits for the participants of the economy. Now, I've been joined in the studio by the research analyst of IMANI Africa, Barbara Ando, who worked with the team at IMANI to get to this particular presentation that was made today. Barbara, good evening and thank you for joining us.
Good evening. Thank you for having me.
So you say local content. What is happening to us?
Local content, well, we are looking at a broader framework because in Ghana we realize that there's now a motivation for the application of distinct local content policies to several sectors of the economy. We realize that this is coming from the place where we have had local content for the oil and gas sector, as well as some requirements for the mining sector. And because of that, there's been some success. So the impetus is to apply the same framework to several sectors of the economy. Now we realize that we need to examine this motivation. We need to make sure that local content is heading in the right direction. We need to make sure that we are making gains from local content because it is costing us to implement local content within sectors.
When you say local content, unpack it for us because it's beginning to sound a bit of a jargon. So local content, local. What exactly do you mean?
So local content, anytime we have foreign investors coming into the country to set up a business, there's a requirement. And mostly the requirements are for the foreign investors to, first of all, employ locals. Secondly, to cede some form of ownership to local companies. There's also the training and employment aspect. There's also the aspect that involves research, development, as well as technology transfer.
So effectively, you're talking about foreign capital that has come into the country, adding some value to local employees, local businesses, and everybody to derive value out of that. And the problem is that it's costing us more to do this in the oil and gas. I mean, we hear government continually, talk about how they're doing good on this particular one. It's strange that, the conclusion of your study is suggesting that we actually spent more than we get.
Yes. Indeed, the gains or the successes can somewhat be seen, but the costs sometimes can be implicit. So if we don't take the time to look at what is costing us, we may just see the surface benefits and write it off and say that, well, we are getting so much benefit from local content, but we do not consider the other side, which is the cost. If you take a reflective look at the cost, it might be a different picture. For instance, if you look at the oil and gas sector, certain costs that are spent in terms of local content are considered cost deductible. That means that the petroleum revenues that we get are to be reduced by the local content costs. That's an implicit cost that we need to look at from a different angle. Once we are not taking those costs into consideration, it may all seem well and good, but it's a different story when you compare the cost to the benefit. And especially want to see this over time, not just over the short period, because you might not see the true reflection.
So effectively, Ghanaians are not benefiting from the oil and gas industry as we would expect. I mean, there are some benefits. As we would expect, we're not getting as much benefit. And the claim is that this is going to be done, we're going to have local content laws in other sectors as well?
Yes, that is the direction now.
The direction of this particular government? Or I'm trying to understand when you say that we are going to have local content in other industries. What industries are these? What other sectors are these?
So first of all, we look at the Ghana Investment Promotion Center, which is supposed to be promoting foreign investment within the country. They have specific requirements of 10% local participation for all sectors of the economy. However, the oil and gas sector comes up and says, look, our situation is different. We need a particular local content policy. The oil and gas sector is given a local content policy. Then the construction sector comes and says, well, you know what? I think our situation is peculiar as well. We need a local content policy. And they start to draft a local content policy. Then the National Petroleum Authority says, well, you know what? We also need local content policy. So now we have several pockets of local content policy in these different sectors. And we do not have an exact way that the sectors are being targeted to apply these local content policies. And we are saying that let's take a break. Let's look at how we are going about this. Let's look at the long-term benefits and let's do it the right way.
So looking forward, because I know the GIPC equally has a law that says that some sectors of the Ghanaian economy are reserved for Ghanaians, which some of us find very interesting most of the time. Because sometimes it's buying and selling hairdresser. And some people argue that, these are not, if you like, sectors that will derive so much or significant value for Ghanaians. So what you're effectively saying is that the heavy sectors or sectors that we think are significant, we need to have clarity on them in terms of what exactly we do. So where do we go from here?
Well, so there has been a general agreement that before we institute anything called a local...
Between who and who? Agreement between who and who?
The stakeholders that are to be involved in drafting local content policies, that are to think through these things for the country. There's a general agreement that we need a direction or a focus, or what they call today a sort of deliberateness in designing these local content policies. It's going to come from having a strategy or a certain philosophy with which we look at the economy. If we know that there are certain sectors in which we need to make quick gains, then we have to have sort of a long-term strategy that is ensuring that over time we're making these gains within
the president is in China trying to drive home foreign investments. There's some $2 billion we have seen. There are 8 other agreements that we understand the president has appended signature to. There's a possible thing here, some 50 billion, which is supposed to be issued 100 years. So what you're effectively saying is that all this money that the president is out there, together with some ministers and delegation, is coming in, and there is no proper plan how Ghanaians benefit from it. Is that what you're saying? Yes,
we are saying that they are planned, but they are pockets, they are in silos. There needs to be a unification of these plans. There needs to be a general direction. So if this money comes in, how are we ensuring that we are employing Ghanaians? And even if we're employing them, not just as masons, not just as carpenters, how do we ensure that they are getting the value that is deserved as locals that are operating within this country? Those are the things that we need to look at.
Barbara, we want to thank you very much for sharing these insights with us.
You're welcome.
Well, that was a representative of IMANI Africa, specifically on the energy desk, and they launched a report on the local content and the local content law that we have across various sectors of the economy. And she was helping us understand